So you're interested in the link between giving and success, huh?
Well, we've got a fascinating deep dive for you today. We're going to be digging into Adam Grant's Give and Take.
Yeah, it's a good one. It really takes a look at what drives success. It challenges that whole idea that it's a dog-eat-dog world out there.
Yeah.
Grant actually makes the case that generosity can be a huge advantage.
Okay, interesting. But he doesn't sugarcoat it, does he? I mean, he opens with that story about the venture capitalist, David Hornick, right? The one who almost loses a massive deal because he was too much of a giver.
Right, exactly. Danny Shader. And Shader actually chose to go with a different investor because he was worried that Hornick would be, well, too nice. Like, he wouldn't give him the hard feedback he needed, to really succeed. Makes you think. Yeah, for sure. It makes you wonder if there are times when holding back a little, being more strategic, is actually the better move, even if you're naturally a pretty generous person.
Totally. And the book actually jumps into that through like a political lens, too. It talks about this guy,
Okay,
Samson.
true giver.
Right? But he runs for Senate and he loses.
Didn't his opponent actually use his generosity against him, like literally called it a weakness?
Yeah. Isn't that wild? It's kind of hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah, no kidding. It really makes you think.
It does. But then Grant, he contrasts Samson with Abraham Lincoln, who very famously invited his rivals to join his cabinet.
Oh, wow.
Right. That's
What?
a serious power move. And it's rooted in generosity. I mean, what seems risky giving power to potential rivals, it actually earned him their respect and their loyalty.
So maybe it's not just about being a giver or not a giver. It's more about like understanding the context of your actions and the impact they can have.
Exactly. Like you said, it's almost like a chess game.
Hmm.
And that leads us to all the different ways giving can show up. And honestly, sometimes it's really hard to tell the difference between genuine generosity and someone just playing the game.
Mhm.
And, sometimes you see people who've really mastered that, like seeming generous, but they've actually got these ulterior motives.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And the book uses Enron, the whole downfall of Enron and their CEO, Ken Lay, as an example.
Oh, right, yeah. Wasn't he like known for this big, like generous persona?
Yeah.
But then obviously Enron completely collapsed, and it turned out he wasn't quite who everyone thought he was.
Totally. Like behind the scenes, he was, taking these huge loans from the company, using their jets for personal trips. He even sold off millions in stock right before the whole thing went bust.
Wow, he really was looking out for number one, huh?
Yeah.
It's crazy how some people can be so good at that kind of deception.
Yeah.
I mean, how do people like that get away with it for so long?
Well, you gotta remember back then it was different, right?
That's true.
It wasn't as transparent as it is today. Like nowadays, everything's out in the open.
Yeah, that's true.
The book actually talks about this really interesting study. They found a link between CEOs who have those really big, dominant photos in their annual reports
Oh, interesting.
and taker tendencies.
Really? You mean like the bigger the ego, the bigger the photo?
It's kind of fascinating. It's like a signal, right? Even these subtle things can reveal your real motivations.
Wow.
But the thing is, like today, with all the social media and online networks, it's way harder to hide that kind of stuff.
That's true. Everyone leaves a digital footprint these days.
Exactly. Grant actually points to this guy, Adam Rifkin, who was named Fortune's best networker.
Wow, okay.
And he built his entire network by constantly helping other people, no strings attached.
Wow.
And that kind of genuine generosity, it stands out, especially today.
That's true.
And it's actually changing how companies operate, too. Like, Grant talks about how Groupon uses social media specifically to look for givers when they're hiring.
Oh, wow. So they're actually like actively seeking them out? That's really interesting. It makes you wonder if all this transparency, if it's actually starting to help genuine givers,
Yeah.
because it's making it harder for the takers to hide.
Yeah, that's a really compelling argument. But what about the people who really are givers and they're incredibly successful? Like, the book tells the story of George Meyer, one of the writers for The Simpsons.
Okay, yeah. What about him?
He's a great example, right? So Meyer, he really thrived in this behind-the-scenes role. He'd rather rewrite other people's stuff, support other writers, than take the credit for himself.
Yeah.
And he understood that this collaborative environment, when it's fueled by generosity, it could create incredible results.
Yeah. I mean, it really challenges that whole idea of the lone genius, doesn't it?
Right. You don't have to do everything yourself. And there's actually research that backs this up. Groups with givers tend to be much more successful. Even individually, givers are often recognized and rewarded more for their contributions because they're lifting up the whole team, right?
Yeah.
It's like this win-win. You get a more positive, more productive environment for everybody.
That's awesome. But I guess it begs the question, what happens when Even with the best intentions, givers get it wrong.
Ah, that is a great question. And that's where perspective taking becomes so important.
Okay.
And the book actually talks about Jonas Salk.
Right, of course. The polio vaccine.
Yeah. And despite this incredible contribution, he really failed to acknowledge everyone else who contributed to his work.
Mm.
So it's kind of a cautionary tale, right? Even when you're in the spotlight, it's so important to recognize the value that other people bring.
It's not enough to just give. You have to give in a way that really lifts people up.
Exactly. It's about shifting that mindset from me to we. And it's interesting, studies actually show that even little kids, like toddlers, they start to grasp this idea crazy early.
Right.
They'll choose to share something based on what they think the other person would like, even if it means giving up what they want.
Wow. So we really are kind of wired for this otherish giving from a young age.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what the world would be like if we all just nurtured that a little more.
Yeah. It's an interesting thought for sure. But how do we actually identify and cultivate that potential, especially in people who might not fit that typical mold?
Mm.
So we've talked about how powerful giving can be, but let's be real, it's not always easy to keep up.
Mm.
Especially when you're juggling a million things.
Mm.
How do you prevent that burnout? Especially if you're someone who's naturally wired to give.
Yeah, that's a big one. And the book actually offers some pretty good advice on that. It talks about this teacher, Connery Callahan, who joined Teach for America, ended up at this really tough school in Philadelphia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she's pouring her heart and soul into it, right? But she hit a wall, Burnout City.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially in that kind of environment where you're so invested in your students.
Totally. And instead of pulling back, you know what she did? She doubled down on the giving. But here's the thing. She got strategic about it, started chunking her volunteer efforts, dedicated 1 day a week. Focused.
Oh, interesting. So it's like instead of this never-ending to-do list, it's these concentrated bursts of giving.
Exactly. And I think it highlights something really important. Sustainable giving isn't about giving less, it's about being smart about it. And it actually connects to this idea of tend and befriend. Giving can actually be a way to build your support network
That makes sense.
and combat stress, which Callahan totally found. Helping other teachers, mentoring students, it created this positive feedback loop.
Right. It's like the more you give, the more you get back. And it creates this upward spiral.
Exactly. It reminds me of that story about John Huntsman Sr., the billionaire. He credits giving for his success.
Oh, yeah. It's like giving fuels his success in a way.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's not about, being a martyr or anything. It's about aligning your giving with your values and finding those ways where it actually renews you rather than depleting you.
Right. It has to be sustainable.
And that brings us to the super important concept from the book, otherish giving.
Okay, break that down for us. What does that actually mean?
It's about looking for those win-win scenarios where, your generosity benefits both the person receiving it and yourself.
Okay, so it's strategic.
Mm-hmm.
It's about creating value that has this ripple effect.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, even people who might seem like takers, they can get on board with this.
You think so?
Oh, yeah. Grant uses the example of free cycle.
Oh, right.
Even someone who wouldn't call themselves a giver, they can see the benefit, right? Declutter their house, get rid of stuff they don't need. But it also taps into that need for connection, that reciprocity.
I like that. So it's like creating systems where everyone wins, regardless of their natural inclination.
Exactly. And there are other examples too. Grant talks about this thing called the reciprocity ring. It's an exercise where people just openly share what they need and then everyone works together to make it happen.
That's really cool. I bet people are way more willing to help out than we realize sometimes, all right?
Totally. It challenges our assumptions,
Mhm.
And it shows the power of creating environments where giving is just the norm.
I love that. Well, this has been amazing. It's really made me think differently about what it means to be successful and how generosity can actually be this driving force, both personally and out in the world.
Absolutely. Hopefully you feel a little more equipped now to go out there and find those opportunities to give.
I do, for sure. And remember, it's not about being a martyr for others. It's about finding those ways to make generosity a powerful force in your own life and in the world around you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.